Now let's get to the assault. The Frenchmen were working like mad with their trench mortars. They kept shells continuously in the air. At 6:03, Sergeant Felix walked along the parapet, informing all our men that we were going over in a few moments. I urged him to keep down, not to make a target of himself, but he disregarded my advice. Finally, as our watches, which had been synchronized before the bombardment, pointed exactly to 6 o'clock, there were whistles and commands, and climbing men leaving the trench all along the line. The gunners who had been working so desperately with the trench mortars to pave the way for us cheered and cried out to us, evidently urging us to sweep the Germans from the hill. I just couldn't understand what they said. And soon we were in the thick of things, bullets flying merrily by this time from the German trenches, perhaps a fourth of a mile away. I was hardly out of the trench until some great force pushed me, knocking me over for a distance of perhaps 20 feet. I didn't know what had hit me, but I felt blood running down my right eye. After that knockdown, I forgot the line of combat groups, and we fought just as our ancestors had always fought. Instinctive rushing forward, stopping to shoot, rushing again, and shooting again. So that's your welcome to combat. Oh, you're all fired up? You ready to go get some? Cool, go over the top. The first thing that happens to you is you get shot, which is what happened to him. He doesn't even know it yet. All Americans have a legacy which has come to them from courageous, fighting, pioneer ancestors. The American soldier is a good soldier. He has not had the centuries of drilling to make his own individual self subservient to the will of the commanding officer. He does not like to salute the brass bar unless that lieutenant has won his respect through deeds. He does not like to be regimented, turned into a mere robot. He can think and act for himself. And when a battle has passed the initial stages, he's the best soldier in the world. This again, reminder, this is World War I. And I say this all the time. People in the military are not robots. And I can't speak too much about people from other militaries, but clearly this was a standout thought as an American looking at American troops in combat. They're not just robots. Mm-hmm. And one of the best things about them is that they can think. Now, here come a bunch of Americans over on some Germans coming up on their trench. Perhaps the Germans were too startled at the size and evident ferocity of their antagonists to fight well for a minute. But it seemed like a group of big men who had met a lot of boys playing soldiers. One push, and the German's rifle was knocked from his hand. A long thrust, and that unfortunate man had reached the end of his life. I can still see the faces of these men, their evident terror, their astonishment at the number of men who leaped at them from the grass, at the size and power of these men, their evident helplessness. There was not time for them to surrender. They had jumped up with bayoneted rifles, and in a moment or two, it was all over. Now this continues. Our advanced troops had passed me by. I could see dead Germans laying here and there. Right near me were two of them close together. One of them was a big older man with a Prussian mustache. His hand still clasped the point in his stomach where the bayonet had gone in and been withdrawn. The youngster lay all twisted up. He too had been bayoneted, and it seemed that his bones were broken from the strokes of the butt of a rifle. A rifle is a wicked weapon when swung by a powerful man, and there were many strong men in action that day. It's, you hear about bayonet fighting, but to think about it on this scale, where this is looking more like a scene out of Braveheart at this point than it is looking like a modern war. Mm-hmm. People clubbing each other to death and stabbing each other at bayonet range. The Germans weren't giving up without a real struggle. We had read a lot about chained machine gunners, but these men weren't chained, and they were fighting to the bitter death. Now, that chained machine gunner, this is like a rumor that happened that the Americans would hear, because the Germans had a machine gun, and it was a big, heavy, sort of a medium weight or heavyweight machine gun. I think it was an MG-08, and it was so heavy that they put this big sling on it. And on the sling, it was made of leather, but they had to reinforce the leather with chain. And so when they would find these soldiers dead with these machine guns, and the chain would clip into their gear, the rumor was that these guys had just been chained to their machine guns. You can't leave. You're just going to stay here and fight to the death.
Dang.
Our men were, back to the book, our men were constantly rising and falling, some of them never to rise again. Our ranks were becoming rapidly decimated, and there were few of us still going forward at this point. I have never seen an authentic list of the casualties of a company that day, but I know this. I never saw a single one of those 58 men of our company who went over the top that night again at the front. I had been hit several times, once on the left knee, once on the right knee. Either bullet could have left me crippled for life, but both glanced off the bone, leaving only a scar which is noticeable to this day. One grazed my arm, leaving a scar at present 1 inch long and 3/4 of an inch wide. I had a variety of feelings as these bullets struck or scratched me. The first, which hit my helmet, gave me the same sensation as if I had been pushed by a gigantic hand. The bullets on the knees stung like I had been hit with a whip, and the bullet that cut through the arm and the one which left its mark on my face felt like a drop of hot water had hit me. About this time, the battle had become very hot. We fired at every enemy we could see, and they were firing from every direction, from the front, left, and right, and even from behind, because we'd gone so fast that we had not dropped the snipers who were firing at us from the trees. Caught in a little 360-degree field of fire. By the way, caught in a 360-degree field of fire after you've been shot, 5 times? We talked about lucky. Obviously, better to be lucky than good at this point.